This podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Not only is it free to use, but it provides you with creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from the comfort of your own mobile device or computer. Anchor also takes care of distributing your podcast for you, so you don't have to worry about making sure you go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts to make sure your latest episode is uploaded. Anchor takes care of it all for you right from the comfort of their website. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership using the sponsorships provided by Anchor. It's pretty much everything you need to make a podcast all in one place, and I can vouch for that. I've been using Anchor for almost a year now, and not only has it been easy and convenient, but it's great as someone who's just starting in the podcast game to really get the podcast name out there and really be able to hone in on my skills of editing, producing, and writing out a podcast episode. So if you haven't started using Anchor yet and you're looking into getting into the podcast game, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Welcome to the first episode of 5 for Podcasting. I want to start off, first of all, by saying thank you to everyone that's already subscribed to the podcast, following it on social media, doing all that. It's not many, just close friends, family. Still, got to start somewhere. So appreciate the follow, appreciate the subscribes, and whatnot. Start off, just want to kind of give you a little bit of background about myself, why I wanted to get into podcasting, to give you a better idea of who I am. So I've been thinking for a while, been wanting to for a while, I should say, to start a podcast. Talked to a few people over the years, try to get something going with other people. And for some reason, for whatever reason, it just never worked out. Whether it was timing, whether it was life circumstances, just didn't work out. And that's partially on me. Wasn't ready for the commitment necessarily at the times before, try to get the podcast up and running. But here we are now. Figured the best way to get this going was to start off solo. Know it's going to be tougher, but figured that was the best way to kind of get things going. So here I am, dropping the first episode of this sports podcast. I guess you can say sports and pop culture. So yeah, by no means am I, professional podcaster or anything like that. No means am I an expert in any of these topics that I'm going to be discussing. This is just my opinion, my way of expressing my thoughts on certain things. And if you like it, great. If you don't like it, great. Just a way to have a discussion. Like I said, I'm not a professional. I'm gonna make mistakes throughout the podcast. You may hear me say a lot, and you may hear me stumble, but we're gonna work through that, and it's only gonna get better as time goes. So, just kind of bear with me there. To give you a little background about myself, I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, or I guess I should say a town a little bit outside of Nashville, but same thing. So grew up huge Tennessee sports fans, all the teams, Titans, Nashville Predators, Tennessee Vols, love them all. Still support them all. Always been into sports, always loved sports. In college, I did a solo blog about sports. Went okay. Didn't do it as often as I would have liked. Again, just didn't have the time to commit to it. After college, lived in Nashville for another 4 years, and then moved up to Chicago, and that's where I am now. When I moved up here, I actually got a writing gig with On the Forecheck, which is a Nashville Predators blog on SB Nation. I was writing for them for about 2.5 years, and then left there.
Just starting to take up too much time. I just got married. We were trying to start a family, whatnot. So it was just taking up too much time. Didn't have the time to commit to it anymore. So after that, kind of took a sabbatical from writing, doing any of that. And then about a year after I left on the forecheck is when I really wanted to get a podcast going. So that's when I started reaching out to some people that I thought that might be interested. Had some traction every now and then with some people, but again, like I mentioned before, nothing came of it. It was just timing was off. Life circumstances happen, different things happen, whatever the case. Um, and it just didn't work out. So about a month and a half ago, decided that, you know what, I really wanted to get this thing off the ground. So I took the time. I kind of laid out what I wanted to discuss, kind of laid out, names, and just started getting to work. And last couple of weeks ago, I should say, created the artwork for everything, got the first introduction podcast up and running, and then last week finally made the jump and started getting the name out there. So that's kind of that's kind of a little bit about me. Like I said, this is my first time doing this. I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna stumble my words. It is what it is. I'm gonna do my best to try not to edit a lot of that stuff out unless it's really bad, just to make it feel a little more natural. You don't want to sit here. I'm sure you don't want to sit here listening to me just um, or I should say, you want it to feel natural. So I feel like the best way to feel natural is to kind of keep that stuff in, make it feel like you're having a conversation with me instead of listening to me on a podcast or a radio show per se. So that's a little bit about me. Hope that gives you a better insight on my opinions moving forward on certain topics, and kind of gives you an idea of how I look at things. So I guess to get right into it, first episode, a lot of things to talk about. Sports are back, which is great. It's fantastic. I know that we've had UFC and Premier League soccer; those have been back for a little bit of time already. But now it's nice to see the hockey, uh, basketball, baseball. We got the first golf major starting this weekend. Having all these things back are fantastic. I think the 4 months without sports, for somebody who loves sports, and all the sports fans out there, it was tough. We were deprived of that getaway of watching games on TV. I don't know about anybody else, but I was resulting back to watching old games on NBA TV, NHL Network. Um, you know, those were kind of just getting me through. So, and then we had the Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary, which got us through 5 weeks, which was fantastic. So, there were things to help us get through, but now we have actual live sports back, and it's fantastic. For the most part, games have been great, uh, from NBA, NHL. Um, it's been everything that I think I was hoping for. Don't know about you guys, but it's definitely been everything that I've been hoping for. You know, the one thing that I've noticed, the no fans aspect of these sporting events actually hasn't been too bad. I know NHL and NBA have been filtering in crowd noise. They've been playing, certain chants, certain music that arenas are used to playing for home teams. So they're really making it feel as normal as possible, which I appreciate. The no fans things it's not really a big deal breaker for me. I actually kind of enjoy it. Obviously, you can't replicate the atmosphere of a game 7 on the road to clinch a spot in the final for the Stanley Cup final or the NBA championship. But it is what it is. It's the situation we're in, and I think the leagues are doing a great job with working with what they have. Um, and that kind of brings me to the bubble. The NBA and the NHL, they've put in place the bubble idea, and it's been very effective. I think with what the NBA and NHL have done to limit it to for the NBA just one city and the NHL two cities, you really cut down on outside outside interactions, traveling, all the things that really put these players at risk um, for getting sick from COVID. So I think those two leagues have really done it right. Um, in terms of moving forward, especially for NFL, this is something I think the NFL really needs to consider. I know the players want to play. I've seen that from Twitter, from players' social medias. They all want to play. Their main concern is safety. You know, that's probably the biggest thing that's holding them up. In terms of whether or not we're going to have a season. I think a lot of players, though, at the end of the day, they want to play, they want to get paid, um, and I think the best opportunity for the NFL to make this happen is to do what the NBA and NHL are doing and have a host city, maybe two host cities, and have a bubble-like environment. Um, we've seen that the testing every day, the quarantining for 2 to 3 weeks before the season starts, and not letting anybody in and out, it works. I mean, we're well on our way to having a great NBA playoffs. We're already having a great NHL qualifying round. So, it's a no-brainer. The NFL has to follow suit. Now, obviously there's a lot of logistics, there's a lot of things that go into that. I'm not by any means uh, I don't know what all would be required to make this happen. But I do know that if the players really want to play and if the owners really want to have a season, the best way to make that happen is to have a bubble. And another reason why I'm saying that is because look at baseball. Baseball, the players did not want to be in a bubble. The MLB didn't want a bubble. And now we have two known teams for sure. For the last time I checked, the Miami Marlins and St. Louis Cardinals that have tested positive for coronavirus. If that rate continues, MLB season is going to be cut short. And it all possibly could have been prevented if they were in a bubble. Now, would it be 100% preventive? Who knows? I do know, though, that it definitely lowers the risk of any sort of any sort of outside contact, any sort of additional risk that the players don't need to put themselves in at the end of the day. So if the NFL wants to have a season, they should really consider that bubble. Now, going back to the NHL and the NBA, talking about the bubbles, I want to first talk about the NHL qualifying rounds. Like I mentioned, I'm a big Nashville Predators fan. At the end of the day, I'm always gonna root for them. My opinion and bias for them is gonna show, obviously, from from time to time on this podcast. So I'm gonna, they started their first qualifying round against the Arizona Coyotes. Now, game one, definitely not ideal. They started off slow. They kind of caught off guard by a very speedy Coyotes team that has a lot of talent up front. Um, and I don't think the Preds were necessarily ready for what they were going to get from them. There were a lot of frustrations after game one that I had personally. I think my main one was I thought Pekka Rinne should have started. I know what a lot of people are going to say. I know that he's getting up there in age. I know UC Saros has been looking great during the regular season, but Rinne had 4 months of rest. We know that when Rinne's rested, he's a different player. I feel like he had his legs underneath him. I feel like you had to give him at least one more run, one more shot at making a run. Um, you know, and that's not a shot against UC Saros by any means. I thought this was UC's first game starting in the playoffs, and you can definitely tell he definitely has some nerves. He let in 4 goals. I will say he did settle down towards the end when the Preds were making their comeback. So he did end up looking good at towards the end of the game. And then for game two, he definitely bounced back. He made some huge saves at the beginning of the game. There was a 5-minute stretch there in the first period after the Preds scored where it was just an onslaught from the Coyotes, and Saros was just standing on his head, keeping the Preds lead intact. Now, he did let 2 goals in the last minute of the game, which was a little concerning, but good news is that there is another game later today, which I am recording this before the game, so I'm not gonna know what the outcome of that. But my guess is that Rene is going to be starting game 3 today, so that'll give Saros a little bit more rest moving forward. Some positives that I saw, and not only that Saros looked better as game 1 went on, and in game 2, but Forsberg looks great. That Jofa line has been great so far. And for those of you who don't know, Jofa is Johansson, Arvidsson, and Forsberg. Forsberg had 2 goals in game 1. Johansson and Arvidsson both had a goal in game 2. So the big guns are scoring, which is great. This is a problem in the past couple of years where the top lines weren't producing for the Preds in the playoffs, and that was always the issue. Where if you're going to make a deep run in the Stanley Cup playoffs, your third and fourth lines can only carry you so much. You're going to have to eventually need your top lines to produce, and they're finally coming through, which is great to see. Now, like I said, this is before game 3, so we'll see how game 3 goes today. I have faith in Rene. I think the Preds will come out strong. I think they got a little scared in the first game, and I think they'll get on track. And speaking of scares in the first game, Edmonton definitely had a scare in the first game against the Blackhawks. Blackhawks just came out and shellacked them. I mean, there's no nicer way to put it, really. I don't think Edmonton was ready. I think Edmonton was too casual. They're playing in Edmonton. I know, albeit no crowd. I know they're being quarantined in a hotel, but they're still in their hometown. I don't think they were taking the Blackhawks seriously, and it really showed in game 1. Now, game 2 was a different story. Connor McDavid is an absolute monster. When you have a guy like that on your team, you're always in it. I mean, even in game 1, when they were down by multiple goals, you weren't really totally convinced they were out of it until towards the end of the third period. Just because McDavid is a type of guy who can score at will if he wanted to, really. And that's not even mentioning Leon Draisaitl. They have 2 guys scoring 100 points each, for the past 2-3 years. So, they have the offensive firepower. I think they were just caught, snoozing on the Blackhawks in game 1. I think they let their confidence get the better of them. But game 2 was definitely a different story, and I think they'll kind of take that momentum from game 2 and carry it into game 3. From the East perspective, there's only one team that's moved on so far, and that's Carolina Hurricanes, and they swept the Rangers. Hurricanes look good. I mean, they look like a well-rounded team. Their offense is clicking, their defense is making key stops. They're getting good goaltending. And that's all you can really ask for. Rangers, they had Panarin, who was up for the Hart Trophy, but Carolina did a pretty good job of keeping him in check. When you can keep a guy like that contained and keep it to a point where the offense isn't running through him, you're going to have a good chance. You're going to give yourself a good opportunity to be successful in that game. For the rest of the Eastern Conference, Toronto looked like they bounced back. The big guns again for them showed up in game 2. Austin Matthews had a goal. Tavares had a goal. Columbus, though, they're no slouch. They showed you in game one that they can really put it to you, and I don't think that series is going to be one way or the other. That series to me has the potential of going the whole 5 games. Um, and that's just because Columbus is a well coached team. They're deep on all ends, and Toronto just has so much talent that you know they had the talent alone could potentially carry them to moving on to the next round. You have the Islanders and Panthers. Islanders are looking good. I have a soft spot for Barry Trotz, the Islanders head coach. He was the coach for the Nashville Predators for many, many years, first coach in franchise history. So I always have a soft spot for him. And to see him have success everywhere he's been since leaving the Predators is great to see. So I always kind of root for the Islanders there. Um, moving on with some of the exhibition play in the East. Um, all the teams in the East, the top 4 teams in the East, all look good. Boston, Tampa, Washington, Philly, they all look good. They're the top 4 for a reason. Um, and same with the top 4 in the West. They're all solid teams. Still, St. Louis, defending champions. Colorado, loaded with talent. One of the best players in the game with Nathan McKinnon. Dallas, same. They've got an amazing first line. Sagan, Jamie Benn. They got a lot of talent as well. Along with Vegas. It's definitely the playoffs are deep with a lot of teams that can make a run, and that's the great thing about the NHL. There's a lot of parity in NHL. You can have a team that comes in as an 8 seed, hence the Nashville Predators in 2017, that really just takes off and makes a run. And with every series being a best of 7, typically you're going to have the best team win the championship. That's just a given fact. So it's definitely great to see hockey finally back. It's great to see the Predators are in the playoffs, and it's definitely great to have games back on TV. One thing I didn't mention is the NHL draft lottery. So this year, whoever actually loses in the first round, the qualifying round of the NHL playoffs, all those losing teams will actually be thrown into a draw, and each team has a 12.5% chance of getting the number 1 pick in this year's NHL draft lottery. So, it's a little bit of a conundrum. Do I, as a fan, want Nashville to lose in the first round and potentially get a franchise-changing player, or do I want them to make a run? For me, I am all about trying to make a run. You never know when you're going to get back to a final once you've been there. And Nashville's seen that the past few years. You never know how long your window is going to be. So if there is an opportunity to advance in the playoffs, you have to take that seriously. You can't leave it to chance with the ping pong balls and a 12.5% chance to get the number 1 pick. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it. So as good as the NHL has been, the NBA has actually been just as good. I've only been able to watch a handful of games so far in the NBA restart, but every game I've watched has been fantastic. The players are well rested. Every team that's in the bubble has a chance. This is one of the smart things that the NBA did, I think, was only inviting people to the bubble, teams to the bubble that have a chance to win. Okay. Now, do I think we could have had less teams? Probably. I don't think there was a point to have Washington there, especially with Bradley Beal not there. I don't think there was a point to have Sacramento and Phoenix there. But I get why they did it. If you're going to have the same standard or same prerequisites to get into the bubble on the Western Conference, you got to have the same on the Eastern Conference. And really, let's be honest, the reason why they did it was because they wanted the potential of Zion Williamson and the Pelicans to get in the playoffs. And after watching their games, clearly, I don't think the Pelicans are. I don't know if they're just not taking it seriously or they're just concerned about Zion's future. But they have him on a limits, a time restriction. I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast the other day, and they were kind of talking about how he wasn't even out there for the 4 most important minutes of the game. At the end of the game, um, he wasn't out there. And if you're really going to try to make the playoffs and you were invited to this bubble, and the NBA is really relying on a guy like Zion Williamson to make the playoffs, not only for ratings, but just the overall betterment of the league, he's got to be out there. And I get it. The Pelicans want to save themselves. They want to make sure that they're protecting their future. And I 100% get it. If I was in their situation, I may be doing the same thing. I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not in that situation. But, it is what it is. And they're, at the end of the day, it looks like they're looking at protecting their future. And if they happen to get in the playoffs on the way, that's a plus. Now, another thing I wanted to add was that every game that I watched has a playoff feel to it. And that's, again, because every team there has a chance to make the playoffs. And every team there is also fighting for seeding. Other than, I would say, probably the Bucks and the Lakers, every other seed is really up for grabs. And I guess Toronto as well. Every other seed is really up for grabs. Teams are trying. Now, I will say the games have been high scoring. And that could be partially because just a lack of defense. Teams are just not playing defense, or it could be because since they're not in the arena, it has more of a scrimmage type feel to it. I don't know what it is. I can tell you though that towards the fourth quarter of the games, um, teams are trying. Defense is becoming a little more locked down. You're seeing superstars really pressing hard, really locking down on defense, and you're seeing superstars really step up and make plays, which is great to see. You know, um, for instance, I watched the Dallas Houston game last week. Houston was down double digits, and they never quit. They came back. Game went to overtime, and Harden just took over. And that's what you want to see. Your superstars coming through and really making big plays. And Harden, who has been notorious of not playing defense, actually played some pretty good lockdown defense on Giannis the other day when they played the Bucks. So it's good to see. Will it keep up? Who knows? That again could just be 4 months of fresh legs. The normal wear and tear of the season isn't quite there. Yes, they did almost play a whole season, but again, almost 4 months off of no game time basketball being played, you're a little bit more rested than you would be in a normal playoff circumstance. Another one thing that I've noticed is the Lakers are looking good. LeBron, this far into his career, he's still, the guy. I mean, he still can get to the rim whenever he wants. Um, he can still make plays. He's making everybody else around him better. On top of that, he now has Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is a force down low. Not many teams are going to have players that can match up with Davis and what he can do. Um, you know, the Lakers, the only knock on them is, are they going to be deep enough to make a deep run? They have no Rondo. Avery Bradley's not there. Do they have faith in guys like Contavious Caldwell Pope and Alex Caruso to be playing crunch time minutes? Who knows? They may even prove everybody wrong and actually be valuable players out there. I know that when I was watching the Lakers Clippers game, Caruso actually made some great plays down the stretch. Um, you know, he definitely was proving his worth out there. So who knows? It's going to be fun to watch as the playoffs progress. Now, one thing that could be disastrous for the Lakers is if they have to end up playing a team like Portland in the first round. Okay. Now, the only knock on Portland throughout the season is that they were just banged up. Dame missed a little bit of time, but really they were missing Nurkic and Collins all year long. Now they're healthy, and now they look good. I mean, Portland looks like a team that, if they get into the playoffs, could cause some real havoc for the Lakers. Um, let's not forget that Portland just made the Western Conference Finals last year. You know, so they've been there before. They know what it takes to make a deep run. The question for them is they've got a really tough schedule, these 8 games, to get into the playoffs. If they can somehow manage their way in, they can cause the Lakers some real troubles down the stretch. Now, the team that's currently in eighth is the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, I'm not, I'm from Tennessee, but I wouldn't say I'm a huge Grizzlies fan. I support them. I follow their games, but I do love Ja Morant. I think he is something special. I think that the Grizzlies uh, have something to build on with him. Um, with him and Jaren Jackson Jr. and the other young guys that they have on that team, that's a really good foundation that Memphis has. My concern was after they lost Gasol, after they lost Connolly, um, I thought it was going to be a rebuilding year for them. I'm not going to lie. I thought it was going to be a rebuilding few years for them, to be honest. But Ja Morant is an absolute beast. Even in this restart, he's been everywhere. I mean, he is making plays. He's playing defense. He is trying to will this team into the playoffs. And you got to respect that. If Ja Morant doesn't win Rookie of the Year, it's going to be a travesty. He's been an absolute beast all year. And Zion, I know Zion. I'm not sure exactly how many games he's played, but I know it's less than half the season. And I just feel like you can't give a guy who's played less than half the season um, an award that celebrates the best rookie of the year. It just doesn't make sense to me. And one last thing I want to talk about the NBA restart is Toronto. Toronto, who would have guessed that after losing Kawhi, one of the best players in the league right now, that they would be where they are right now. They're sitting at the number 2 seed right now, and they're poised. They're very poised to really make a deep run at this and defending their title. You know, is it going to be a long road? Yeah, obviously, but they're still just as deep. They've guys like Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet have really stepped up and have really kind of covered the scoring that Kawhi left behind. And I think Kawhi being there for a year was enough time to kind of instill this type of mentality in a team, where they know what it takes to win now. They know how to carry themselves. They know what they need to do on a daily basis to push themselves ahead of all the other teams. Now, will they be able to get past the likes of Boston, Milwaukee, Miami in the East? Who knows? That's to be determined. But they do have a pretty good chance. And if I was a betting man, I'd probably put some money on Toronto. This year is really anybody's game. And that's kind of the great thing about the NBA this year in this bubble, is that we really don't know what's going to happen. And as a sports fan, you got to love that. So that wraps up my first episode, guys. Hope you enjoyed. We'll be back soon with episode number 2. Again, follow me on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter at 5 for podcasting. You can subscribe on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Google Podcast. We're working on getting on Apple Podcast as we speak. As soon as we do, I will definitely let you know. But anywhere you can get your podcast, find us there. 5 for podcasting, and click the subscribe button, rate us, leave us comments, and you know the deal. So we'll talk to you soon.